Welcome, my friends, to the Sage of Quay Radio Hour, your home for free and critical thinking, and I'm your host, Mike Williams. Tonight, Cara St. Louis returns to the show to complete part 2 of our discussion that we began with part 1 with Harold Kautzvella. Cara and Harold have co-authored and released a fantastic new book called Dangerous Imagination, Silent Assimilation. For this show, Cara will talk to us about how the heart chakra is the key to humanity's ability to break free from the shackles of the archonic matrix. We then discuss how the puppet masters, by controlling the media, which includes the publishing industry, is keeping knowledge and truth suppressed in order to prevent the masses from awakening to their full potential. We end our conversation with Cara explaining how the social engineering agenda is a major tool of the matrix to keep us on the hamster wheel of deception. And so without further ado, here is Cara St. Louis. Let's take a listen.
Hi, Mike.
Hi,
Thanks
Cara.
for having us back. That's just amazing. I love talking to you, and thanks for providing such an open forum for such a broad and deep analysis of these topics, because this is not easy stuff. It's not easy stuff. Although I will say that my bringing it, when I bring something, it's just like Middle America brings it. What I'm trying to say when I say that is, if I can get my head around this, if I can learn to live with the stuff that I find out from one day to the next, then anybody can in the U.S. And that's really the bottom line, is that this stuff is going on. We have to meet it where it is, and we have to figure out what we have to. There are things that we have to do things about, and there are things that we can't do anything about. We should just hit the reset button and start over in some way. And that's kind of one of the themes about today. Just commenting on some of the stuff that I listened to Harold talk about. First of all, I want to reiterate what he said about the heart chakra. I want to reiterate what he said about that which makes us A, a prize for the people who are trying to subdue us, and B, invincible to the people who are trying to subdue us, because that is the case. That is the case. There are two things that I want to say, and I hope I can say this in a really sort of understandable way. First of all, one of the things I know for sure is that the predator, and I call it the predator, and I always will now, because we have a predator. One of the things that the predator is looking for is that undefinable, unseeable, unknowable part of us, and I mean that from the predator's perspective, that they know they have to get a handle on. They have to find it in order to completely subdue us. And that, in fact, is the frequency at the heart chakra. My absolute, and my deepest feeling, to the point where it's a knowing, is that they can't see it. They know something is there that's protecting us, that's preventing them from getting to us in the final analysis, but they're not even equipped to see that frequency. So they can't find it. And if they can't find it, they can't subdue it. That's the heart chakra. And right now, the heart chakra is in full swing development in the human being. It's getting bigger and bigger and better and better, and stronger and stronger. So as Harold has indicated, as long as that in fact is the case, they simply cannot subdue us in the final analysis. That will protect us. We will always be stronger than they are. We will always be better equipped than they are. And the other reason that the reason that kind of makes us a prize is one of my favorite subjects, although I'm just learning to talk about this. Human beings, in my opinion, are an intermediary. We are an intermediary between the morphic field, which is what carries the sort of stuff of generation, the stuff of genesis, the stuff of our ability to manifest anything on the 3D plane, okay? And it is that thing that's just outside us. In fact, it's everywhere. We call it counter space, all right? Some people call it antimatter, I suppose.
Yeah.
No, it's counter space. It's there, but it's the opposite. It's like the etheric. It's the opposite of this. It's what's outside us, and it's everywhere. If I put my hands like this and I cut my hands, I'm holding it, you know? And there are certain times when you can feel that it's there, that something is there. Okay, but human beings are magic. Human beings are the interface between that and what manifests on the planet. And that makes us co-creators. It makes us creators. in the truest sense of the word. Now, I would say, in my suspicion is that the predator wants that ability, and the only way that they can get that ability is by using human beings as tools. Okay? This, I think, is one of the biggest goals of the other side, is just being able to use our ability to create, because they can't create. Hence, you have, copies, you have clones, you have trees that aren't really alive, you have, sort of the astroturfs kind of things that, that are almost alive, that continue to be created, but they really aren't the genuine article, and only human beings can facilitate the genuine article. Now, we can leave out the religious connotations of that. That's not what I mean. It's not really a part of this discussion right now. I'm simply talking about, if you will, the creator endowed ability of human beings to manifest, materiality in 3D. We can do that. We are co-creators. Now, the heart chakra has a lot to do with that, I think. But mostly what it has to do with is our imagination, which is the first chapter of the new book. And it's actually part of the title, Dangerous Imagination. And that's one of the things that has been job one for the predator, is dismantling our imagination, disconnecting us from it in any way possible. And this is where the term full spectrum dominance comes from. When they say full spectrum, they are not kidding, Mike. You know that.
Right.
It's in, I actually, it is so pervasive, this thrust to get us in any way that they can, that I actually just stopped using laundry detergent in my clothes. I use Indian soap nuts now, because the Club of Rome, if you go back and read their sort of manifesto, which I think, did it come out in 1960? Something along those lines.
It was decades ago, yep.
Yeah, decades ago, saying we're going to get them in every way we can. It's going to be, their clothes are going to be poisoned. Their, everything that's around them is going to be a poison. And that's exactly what's going on. So this is another thing that, people out there, when they're listening to stuff like that, probably thinking, oh God, I just can't hear stuff like that. That's just too much. But the reality is.
Or they don't believe it.
No, they don't believe it. But that's okay. They don't have to. As long as their heart chakra is intact, we'll be okay, I suppose. But this was just something I was using to illuminate this idea, or to illustrate this idea of full spectrum dominance. I mean, how complete the attack is upon us. In fact, one of the things I'm going to start talking about really soon is going to seem really fringe to everybody. I'm not going to talk about it today too much, but one of the things that's really been absorbing my consciousness for a while now is this idea of food. What constitutes nutrients? What is sustenance, Mike, for the human being?
Cara, one moment though, I just want to go back to one thing you said, which is very important. And you said that the human beings were being used as tools, as conduits by the predators. And, as you said that, I was thinking to myself, she's spot on, because without humans being that conduit or that tool, they couldn't implement any of their agenda on Earth.
Right. Exactly.
Right? Because if humans weren't here, what would they do?
Yeah, exactly.
Right? So I want the audience to think about that. Some audiences might be shrugging their shoulders, but there's a reason why they're using humans to get their agenda across. And so if you refuse to be a tool, right?
In any level.
Yeah. Right. You could stop it at its tracks.
That's
anyway,
right.
I digress, but I wanted to point that out.
Actually, you're not digressing, though. That is the entire point, is it not? I mean, there are things that we must address actively. One of those things is that we have to breathe. Yeah?
Right.
So we have to do something about what they're putting into the air. That's inescapable. We have to breathe. But there are things we don't have to do. We do not have to say, okay, for example, please, let's not waste any time trying to make them use the television set for the good of humanity. Okay, let's just turn the damn thing off.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
There are battles that are not worth fighting, and we can't win them anyway, and even trying would be a waste of time and energy. So just turn the damn thing off, because it's one of the biggest ways that they control you. Yeah?
That's right.
Yeah, so we have to start, I think we have to start thinking about where to put our energy. Yeah? And this is one of the things, this is see, this is what happened when my mother died. It led me to all of these understandings about atmospheric weapons and electromagnetic weaponry, and you know, all of the things, the terrible, terrible things that that one finds out when one starts researching that kind of stuff. And then after talking for a while, Mike, doing interviews and things, not that you asked me this question because you didn't, God bless you, but so many interviews that I had when the very first question was, what's the difference between a contrail and a chemtrail? Yeah. I was like, okay, here we go again. But okay, and fair enough for your first question, yeah. But then we never get past that.
Right.
We never get past that. And the fact that we never get past that question and the thought that too many people would have to know about this for it to be happening, those two things led me to look into this idea of why can't we get past that? And that led me to this project that I'm working on with Harold, wherein I handled a part of it that had to do with the social engineering, only dealing with the 20th century. It's been going on forever, but you know what? I don't care, because we need a chunk of time we can deal with.
Right. Yeah. A starting point.
I mean, a starting point. I don't care what happened. I mean, I do care because it's in the book briefly, but it doesn't help us right now in a practical boots on the ground way for me to talk about Plato for the next 2 days.
Right.
You know, no. What helps us with boots on the ground is to say, okay, 20th century. Yeah, we can get our brains around that. All right. So what happened during the 20th century? Social engineering on a level that was unprecedented, and it is still going on, and it has to do with the overthrow of our cultures, cultural overthrow, specifically the Western civilization. You know, I mean, we don't have to spend lots and lots of time on that because, like I said, Harold and I've covered this now, and then the second half of the book is Harold's expertise, which is the science, the pure science. And that's where he likes to live. He's a physicist and a geologist and a clairvoyant and all kinds of wonderful things. So anyway, so but that's really what that's leading me to, is this idea of these tiny little threads that take us places, you know? And one of the tiny little threads that's turning into a giant, like, hairball in my throat right now is this idea of food.
Yeah.
All of the just think about the emotional baggage that goes along with it. In every way. I mean, I love to cook. I love to eat. I love all of those things. Julia Child was one of my heroes. Blah blah blah. All that stuff, right? But when you back up from that, and you ask yourself, okay, but what does it mean to sustain myself as a human? What is sustenance? Where does that come from? You know, and you start thinking about the sun. You start thinking about the fact that human beings are filters. You start thinking about it on a very sort of pure, you know, I'm just this human being level. Then what starts to happen is you start to look around at all the stuff that goes with food, and you see the assaults, and you see the addiction. And do you see what I'm saying?
Yep.
So all it really takes is one little thread, and all of a sudden, because I know that's going to lead me to every other, you know, sensory addiction that we have, and all our senses are being manipulated. We are being manhandled like crazy. And by the way, we don't have 5 senses, we have 12.
The 5 is all they want you to know about.
That's right, Mike.
Right.
The 5 is all they want you to know about. I'll give you a really good example of one of the senses, one of the 12 senses, which is what, as a Waldorf teacher, I was completely trained. We were trained to be able to observe these senses and how they're being manifested in children, or how they're injured in children, all of those sorts of things. And I will tell you that I'm teaching at a school in London right now, which means these are children who have grown up in a big city with lots of noise and a very unnatural rhythm. There's really no EMAG rhythm here that isn't jarring or unsettling and all of that. But what I've noticed in the younger children is a very injured sense of movement, and that has to do with not being able to locate or feel or resonate with any kind of natural frequency. I think it behooves us to all find out that there are 12 senses, for one thing, and how they're being affected. Anyway, so yes, and also, can I tell you, one of the things I really want to make sure that we talk about is communication today. It is a favorite topic of mine because I was absolutely so stunned when I moved to Europe, immediately realizing what we don't get to hear in the United States.
Yeah.
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 Because we're completely cut off from all America. Listen to me right now. Listen to me. You don't know what's going on. They are not telling you. They are not telling you. They're keeping all of it from you. And you think you do, but you don't. And it becomes patently clear the minute you step off American soil, especially, I can really only talk about Europe because that's been where I've lived for the last 3 years. But I will tell you, my daughter came to visit me not too long ago, my 20-year-old, and we went to France. And it's one of the first things she said to me, Mom, what? Because we were even just sort of, we were sort of switching through what I would call, a couple of the more slick offerings from the alternative community, which is RT and Al Jazeera. You're never really quite sure as they get slicker and slicker, and as you start seeing Larry King show up on RT, you're like, I don't know.
Right.
But just what was coming on through those venues, her chin was on the floor, Mike. She called her dad. Dad, you have no idea what we don't. So it's immediately apparent, and we need to understand that, because the only thing that you can do about that, America, is listen to these alternative programs like what Mike's putting out right now and pull the threads. Follow the threads, go under the radar, okay? Do like a belly crawl along the grass, okay? And pick up the information that's coming along down there. And I actually told my daughter, for the foreseeable future, I have no intention of moving back to the United States because I will completely lose track of what's going on. And I can try to get information in from here.
Yeah.
I can try.
Well, it's interesting, Cara, you bring this up because, as you know, I had a discussion with Max Egan last night. So one of the things that Max and I talked about, we started talking about Zionism and what was going on in Gaza and Palestine with regard to the Israeli occupation. And I had said to Max that, at least from my vantage point, when I take a look at what Europe knows and understands about Zionism and how they get up out of their chairs and they will make noise and protest and make it known that they understand what Zionism is about and they understand what's going on in Gaza. When you come to this country in the United States, everybody's still walking around in a zombie state.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And I mentioned to Max that, and not to go off on the rails here on this, I know you and I, this is not the topic that we meant to talk about, but I said to Max, I said, in this country, people, first of all, they don't know what Zionism is, and if those that have heard the word, they equate it with Judaism, with being a Jew.
Right.
And so therefore, if you make a comment with regard to Zionism and you're not in favor of Zionism, you're anti-Zionism, you are then anti-Semitic.
Right. They don't make that. They can't make. Well, we're trained to not make that distinction.
Yeah. So my point being is that I agree with you that the United States still is in I don't even want to say an information void. They're in a knowledge void. Because there's lots of information. Information's good, information's bad. But then you have to take that information and you have to digest it, and then it becomes knowledge and then wisdom. But in this country, in the United States, I'll tell you, we still have deep, deep problems with people waking up.
Right. I have a really good friend here called Gilad Atzmon. You may have heard his name.
Mm-hmm.
He's a Jew. He's an Israeli, but he left Israel decades ago, and he would probably lose his life if he set foot in Tel Aviv again at this point. And it's not that he hates his country at all. It's just that he is calling it like it is, and he's writing really good books about it. One of them is called The Wandering Who. And if you really want to know some stuff about separating Israel and Jewish identity politics and Zionism and getting really clear on that, I recommend Gilad's book. That's Gilad Atzmon, Atzmon. You can get his books in the United States. He's also an internationally acclaimed jazz saxophonist. I just saw him do a concert here in celebration of Iranian music. It was really cool. And And he regularly sells out the London Jazz Festival, so he travels around the world as well. So he's more than just a philosopher. He says he's not an activist. Thank you very much. He doesn't want to be called an activist. He is a philosopher. Okay, so anyway, but let me say a couple of things about communication while we're on the subject, and then we can talk about the mind control that represents the social engineering aspect of what Harold and I are trying to bring as best we can to consciousness. We have been trying, as you know, for a long time to get our work out into the English-speaking world. And I have said to you more than once that Germany is really the only place that we've been able to get a big old serious audience. We just seem to be able to get our work out into Germany. But we have all decided to make a big push to get this worldwide, and it's not that we haven't been trying to do that. It's just that we've been blocked at every turn. And so some of the things I want to bring to the American public, because if you take these little details that we're having to work with and you put them in your brain, and maybe it'll give you a more practical handle on how everything is being locked down informationally. Okay. Something I found out today, I mean, I'm just trying to pick a place to start. Something I found out today is that Dangerous Imagination, Silent Assimilation is only available in Canada in Kindle form. Why that would be is beyond me, because The Sun Thief is certainly available worldwide as a paperback, right? But all of a sudden, Dangerous Imagination is only available in Kindle in Canada, an English-speaking country for the most part, in Australia, an English-speaking country for the most part, yeah. I have had to set up a new site, which I want to tell you about, Mike, because I want everybody to hear it. I set up a site on Shopify, yeah, so people can order the paperback no matter where they are. They just have to pay whatever the shipping is.
Did you inquire with Amazon as to why your book is only available on Kindle? That does seem a little bit odd.
I know, because I just found that out today.
Okay.
Suzanne Mayer. Is that how you say her last name?
Yeah.
You know who I mean.
Yes.
She's the one who let me in on that this morning as I was waiting to come on and talk to you. And then there was a fellow in Australia who wanted to order the books and contacted me and said, I want the paper, and all I can get is the Kindle. And I thought, what? Because there's no way that Amazon doesn't have book on demand capacities in every country.
Oh,
in
absolutely.
The world.
Yeah.
What they're doing is they're relegating this particular information into a very controllable format.
Right.
They can go through Kindle and take things out, put things in, whatever they want. So chances are very good that you will not be seeing my work on Kindle anymore, which is unfortunate because it's cheaper that way. However, I've always had some questions about Amazon anyway, because the big companies which is not to say I have any proof of anything, Amazon, but the big publishing facilities, whether it's Random House or any of the big publishers or any of the big distributors like Amazon, they're completely controlled, and they can put out or not put out, or sell or not sell, or block orders, or they can do whatever the hell they want, and they do in the United States, and they certainly do in the English-speaking world. So I just found that out today. So I have set up a Shopify channel, which I will make sure Mike absolutely has the address to, and you can just order it straight from me. And I just sent 2 books to Australia, so no, it is no big thing. And they got there. That was my test run. So there's that. The other thing is I've decided that I want to get into Japan and I want to get into India. India is a big old sleeping giant, Mike. They are so asleep. They are so asleep. Everything's working out really well for them, for the most part, I would say. They're becoming an economic, if they are not already categorized as an economic superpower. Yeah?
Yep.
But they're also being chemmed. And if we could wake up India even a little bit, and they all read English, or at least that's, it's okay, apparently, to publish in English in India. So I'm trying. Now,
Cara, some of the audience might be thinking, oh, what's the big deal? Digital media, electronic delivery of the product versus the old-fashioned paperback. And what you have to give thought to is the fact that, and you touched on this, is with the digital media, especially with books, they can be revised at will. Content can be taken, content can be added, and that's why they don't like written paged books, print books, because once it's printed and once it's bought and somebody has it, there is no revising that
Yep.
book, right? So I just
Yep.
want to point that out to the audience in case they were scratching their heads and trying to wonder why it is Cara had a problem with just Kindle.
Yep. The word is mightier than the sword, but only if it's on paper.
Right.
Yes. So thank you, Mike. We do need to clarify that because I want them to understand why I would make it more inconvenient and slightly more expensive to
Right.
get this material, but that is why. The other thing is Japan. Let's talk about Japan because India is an enigma to me right now. I will keep you posted on my trying to get in there. A couple of people trying to help me get in there, but mostly there's just silence and a giant covering of nothingness in terms of these kinds of subjects. Although they do have, who's the Indian woman who's the physicist who's talking about Vandana Shiva? Yeah, Vandana Shiva does have a platform, but she's talking about, and she is talking about very, very important things. But the rest of the world has no way of knowing how much of that's actually getting into India. All right, we hear her out here, but we don't know if they hear her in there, do we? Anyway, the other couple of other things that are going on. I sent the PDF to a fellow called Johnny Guzman in Ecuador. Have you heard of this character?
No.
Yeah, he runs QLP TV, and you can QLP.TV, I think. Anyway, he is hooked up. He's hooked up significantly with Santos Bonacci. I know you know the mighty Bonacci.
You might know Santos, yes.
Yeah. So they're definitely partners in crime. And Johnny grew up in the United States. He's completely Americanized in terms of his English and his understanding and all of that. But he's in Ecuador right now, and he's got the PDF, and I've asked him to read it. And if he likes it, to help me get somebody on board to translate in Spanish. Let's see if we can get, half the world speaks Spanish, Mike. Let's see if we can get the Spanish language speakers to be part of the conversation here.
Exactly.
And then the other thing is Japan. Now, Japan is a really interesting situation right now. I have to tell you, this is intriguing. This is intriguing, and this is cloak and dagger stuff all of a sudden, because I'm friends with Ben Fulford, thanks to a connection I had through Veterans Today, and then subsequently when I was working for the People's Voice, I was trying to get him on, and that's a whole other story. But so I contacted Ben and I said, look, I would really like to get this book into Japan. Do you have any suggestions? I just wanted some hints, And he said, okay, I know the publisher who handles this kind of stuff. I'll contact him. So he did. And then I didn't hear. So I emailed Ben back and I said, would it be really, really rude business practice for me to contact this guy directly and ask him? And he said, what? He hasn't gotten back to you. That's weird. So he went back to his emails to find out what was going on. And every one of the hundreds to thousands, I suppose, of emails that he'd had back and forth with this guy over the years had disappeared from his email account. They were just gone. So he comes back to me and he said, it looks like somebody doesn't want this book out in Japan. So let me call him and see if we can clear this up. So he did. And then I got this email from someone. I'm going to say someone because neither Ben nor I are really sure who it was.
So you can't verify who this person actually is.
Got this email, back and forth. Oh, Mr. Ishii doesn't speak English and blah, blah, blah. So I'm his go-between and, send me the information and the, blah, 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 blah. And I'll ask him. Okay. So I did. And a couple days later, less than 48 hours later, really, he said, oh, well, I've run this by Mr. Ishii, and he has said that, this is not right for his audience. And I thought, oh, bummer, because, if Fulford can't help me on this one in Japan, I don't know who can, right? So I was talking to several people about this, you and Harold and a bunch of people, and I thought, I'm going to ask Ben I'm going to send him this string of emails and see if he thinks it's legit, and then I'm just going to drop it and try to get somebody else on it. I sent it to him this morning or last night. I get this email back saying, wow, this looks really suspicious. This does not look legit. So he's calling Mr. Ishii again to find out if, in fact, this guy was his representative. This kind of thing, I hate to say I enjoy it, but on some level I kind of enjoy it.
Yeah.
Because all I really want, in the end, all I really want is for all of this information to go far and wide, yeah? In as many countries and languages as it takes to get the 100th monkey thing going, because all we really need is enough people to know, yeah?
Right.
And since they're keeping us out of the English-speaking world, America, and Canada and Australia. By the way, Duncan Rhodes is supposed to be reviewing this book for Nexus when he gets time, but he's really, really busy, so I'm awaiting that with bated breath, and I hope that will help in Australia and New Zealand. But anyway, all we need is critical mass. We just need critical mass, and then it's in the field, and if we know, everybody knows, and the job's done, yeah?
Yeah, get the momentum going, that's right.
And we can get on to doing other stuff.
You know, it's interesting, Cara, you talk about Japan. Didn't Japan pass legislation that says you can't talk about Fukushima?
I don't know. Did they?
Yeah. So if you criticize Fukushima, I mean, you could go to jail. So it doesn't surprise me that, you're trying to get your book published there, that there might be some roadblocks. And, I want to also tell the audience that for some that think that, this is just wild conspiracy theory where emails are purged or there's deception with regard to the chains of communication trying to get to somebody. I have two examples, really good examples. I interviewed, as you know, David Icke and earlier last year, and Jordan Maxwell last year. And the whole time I was had the discussion, the interview with David Icke, somebody kept futzing with the Skype. And I actually had to go back and I had to redo everything that I had said, the questions and the comments I had said with David, because what was going on was they were essentially turning off me. Okay? So when I went back and listened to the recording, I heard David, but I couldn't hear me, or it was very, very low in the background. So I had to go in and I had to recreate the questions and comments that I had to David, so I actually had an interview with David Icke. And there was another time with Jordan Maxwell when we started talking about certain topics that got into extraterrestrial types of threads, where all of a sudden the entire Skype connection just got obliterated with buzz and noise, and we couldn't hear Jordan. Yeah. And so this stuff happens, and somebody could say, well, Mike, that was coincidence and everything else, but I don't know. You've had it happen to you. It's happened to me.
We just had it happen twice between you and I.
Yeah.
They let Harold on, but every time I tried to talk to Mike, they shut off my Skype. So my husband luckily left his computer up, and I was like, because I've got to get to Mike now. But no, it just happened twice. Every time I started to talk to Mike, they shut off, they 86 my Skype. And I know it's Mike because I went over to my husband's computer and called my Skype from my husband's computer, and it was fine. But I could not even get, today I couldn't even get any typing over to Mike, much less talk to him on the phone. So, and we did have to talk about that, Mike and I think he's right. They let Harold come through because Harold handles, Harold is intriguing. People do listen to him. There's no question that his delivery is wonderful and useful and beautiful, but he's the science guy.
It's the scientific explanation.
So when I come in and I try to midwife, which is the way he puts it now, I try to midwife this for the rest of humanity, then they want to shut me the hell up. And that's been my whole reason for doing any of this. It's why The Sun Thief was written. It was written in a way that people could connect with, people would be entertained by, so that they would be drawn in, and they could use their beautiful, powerful imaginations. And once you have people's imaginations, they can do anything. They've got to be retaught that they can do anything with their imaginations, and that is our biggest God-given gift. So, but and the other thing is, even though Mike and I are we have to, a lot of this is entertaining, and it is enjoyable, and it's good to have these wonderful stories to talk about, but it really is serious stuff as well. And I think that when Harold was talking yesterday about the RNA and the piezoelectric effect and all these things that we're having to learn about, because we need to understand what we've bioadapted, what we've bioaccumulated in our bodies, and what they're trying to turn us into, and which is something that's not really physically human. They can't touch the humanity in us. Please remember that. They cannot touch the humanity in us without our permission, for sure. And even then, they can't get the whole thing because it's really not possible for us to give it away. I was thinking about the Sun Thief, and I was thinking about the part, well, maybe you haven't read it yet, but I'll tell you, some people blow up sort of spontaneously in the Sun Thief. Soldiers and, well, pilots. And that's not a lie. That's not conjecture. That's not science fiction. When you're talking about altering us at a cellular level and being able to, assassinate us in that way anywhere on the planet, that's possible.
Spontaneous combustion.
Yeah, spontaneous combustion, it happens. And the interesting thing is, when I was writing that book, I was just writing the book. You know what I mean? I was just sort of reliving what I was going through, reliving what maybe I thought maybe had led my mom to be in the position that she was in, and then making some wishes for the future about how I was hoping things would turn out. And as my friend Harold says, we do not write fiction. And he's right, we don't. See, look at that. That just made me tear up. But we don't.
Right.
We write what they're telling us to write. We're being helped all the time. We're being helped constantly. And so all we have to do is just trust it and do what's in front of us to do. I used to ask one of my spiritual teachers, okay, so now I know all of this stuff. What am I supposed to do? And she'd say, well, you're doing it. You're doing it right now. You're just living your life. This is what you came here to do, so just keep doing it. Believe me, it'll be put in front of you to do whatever it is that comes next. There's no avoiding it. So.
Well, we all think that we should be doing something bigger and larger and more impactful. I look at it this way, Cara, and I'll say this quickly because I know you have a lot to cover here, but if I can touch one person, you can touch one person, then now instead of one of us, it's two of us. And if those two people go out and touch a person each, then it's four. It's the exponential growth that we're looking for, So you're not going to move mountains by yourself. You do, like you said before, we need to get critical mass. Then we can move the mountain.
Yeah. I mean, I don't have to tell every single person on this planet this story.
Right.
I just have to tell enough people this story.
Exactly.
And have I told you the story briefly because it fits with this theme? Have I told you the story about the guy standing in the rain in Rostock? No. Okay, I got to tell you this story because this goes right to this theme of touching one person. There are these things in these events in Germany called the Monday meetings, which is a Monday demonstration that they've sort of broken out all over the country, and one of them was held in Rostock, which is the shipping town in northern Germany, as the best of my geographical knowledge will tell me, and somebody showed me this video of this one lone fellow standing in the darkening gloom of a winter evening in Rostock at one of these Monday meetings under this umbrella, talking to whoever was there in the square on a Monday. And lo and behold, Mike, and I swear I almost cried, he pulled out the Sun Thief. Wow. In German, and he started to read. All right? Now, one guy, God knows where, clear across the world, right? This is the one person, if you think about it, that's been touched. And there he is standing there, one guy, all by himself, saying, you got to hear this. Right. Standing in the rain under an umbrella on the North Sea. I mean, you cannot not fall in love with humanity, with human beings when you see stuff like that. Yeah. Are we not amazing? We are amazing when we want to be. We are the most amazing creatures. We can also be dolts when we want to be, so. Absolutely we can. Which takes us to this idea of social engineering. I mean, I don't want to bore people. I don't want to, because I've already put it in a format that's not boring elsewhere. But the reality is, before World War I began, there was a plan in effect to socially manage the world. For lots of reasons. Some of them are economic, some of them are for sheer power, some of them are just because we're dealing with psychopaths. Some of them have to do with political ideologies that a certain fringe element, well, they're not really fringe anymore, thinks they're justified. But the reality is, once the precursors to the Tavistock Institute in Great Britain, decided to see if they could turn a British population on a German population with whom they had absolutely no quarrel. And in fact, they managed to do that, and they managed to set up a situation where they were tearing each other limb from limb for no reason. They knew that they had unlocked some secrets to our psyche, and that they could convince us to do things that we would not ordinarily do. And once they had that in the bag, boy, did they run with it, you know? The Tavistock Institute became an entity with more than 3,000 arms worldwide. And they're called different things. The Institute for Social Research. Kurt Levine in Michigan started something, I can't remember right offhand what it's called. Sorry to say, but there's the Rand Corporation. There's the New School was actually the New School went to the Frankfurt School, but it kind of all became the same giant octopus. Even if they compete with each other, even if they think that in the end one will dominate the other, it's really all the same octopus. You've got the Tavistock Institute, and not too long, and that, by the way, really got going in 1913, which is a huge date. That's also the date that the Federal Reserve was begun.
What a shock.
Yeah, I mean, it's all, look at 1913, look at 1919. These are two hugely important dates. Also, 1933, especially for the United States. But then there was the Frankfurt School, and the Frankfurt School started in Germany, yes, but it was a collection of Bolsheviks. It was a collection of people who ended up calling themselves Freudo-Marxists. And they were people who took the failed Bolshevik revolution, the thing that tried to happen in Russia and really didn't completely happen, and they wanted to foist it on the rest of the, particularly on Western civilization. And friends, that's still what's going on. We are still heavily under attack from the Frankfurt School. They call themselves the Institute for Social Research. That's one of the things the book covers. And, you know, full spectrum dominance is their description. It's their job description. We're talking about entertainment. We're talking about music. We're talking about overlaid culture. We're talking about the destruction of the nuclear family, which was a really, really important thing for them. In fact, that happened almost immediately. The Tavistock, I mean, not the Tavistock, but the Frankfurt School, the first thing that they went after was the father of the nuclear family. We talk about the sacred masculine. We should talk about the sacred masculine as much as we talk about the sacred feminine. And the fact that I get nervous, or I used to get more nervous than I do today, but I grew up in the United States during a certain time in history. And so when I start saying things like sacred and masculine together, I get all nervous because I'm supposed to not believe those two things go together.
Exactly. That's right.
Yeah. So, and they do. All right. And the first thing that the Frankfurt School did was go after the father figure in the nuclear family. Their postulate was, their crazy, irrational postulate was that children who come out of an authoritarian nuclear family are anti-Semitic, will be anti-Semitic. Now, I don't see you find me the logic in there. I defy anyone to find me that logic trail.
No, they'll create the logic.
Yeah.
They have the premise, now they'll create the logic.
Exactly. There is none. So The first thing they did was get rid of the dad, make the dad the bad guy. And 100 years later, we're seeing Homer Simpson on the television and all of those things. That is still in full swing. The destruction of the male human being as a figure of any respect or authenticity or value in the human makeup. Yeah. So then they went after the sacred feminine, the mother. So and the thing is, once they got the mother out of the home working, because economically it had to be that way, and because we were trained to believe that if we didn't leave the home, that we were fools. There was something wrong with us for wanting to raise children and be in the home, as if that was an illegitimate choice, is as legitimate as anything else. Then the children were very, very vulnerable. And when there's a vacuum created like that, because you get rid of the mother, you get rid of the father, then the military can step in, then the government can step in, anybody, the schools especially, can step in loco parentis, and you've got Institutions, raising your children, telling them what to think, okay, and what to do. And that's what's been going on for the last 100 years. They've been raising human beings to follow orders. They've been raising human beings to be little tiny cogs in wheels, okay? And all of this was in the best interests of the industrialists and anybody else who wanted to control humanity. And so all of this came to a head in the 20th century. And that is the answer to the question, frankly. I mean, we're talking about behaviorism, we're talking about Taylorism, we're talking about education stemming from the Prussian education system. All of these things came together to make us people who would do a couple of things. First of all, not only would we allow ourselves to be gassed from the sky, but we would willingly do it to each other because we were convinced that we were doing a good thing. Yeah? Mm-hmm. It is just that we're letting it happen to us. We're doing it to each other. That's number one. All right? And number two, we became people who continue to ask questions like, couldn't it just be a contrail? Okay? I mean, there is a mechanism, a behavioral mechanism in place over us now that keeps us on a mental hamster wheel. We can get off that. I don't want to continue to use words like can, okay? We absolutely can get off that because the moment you know that, you just step back. You just step right off of that. And then suddenly you're seeing all of the ways that your thinking is controlled, your thinking is conditioned, and all of it resonates as in an addictive way. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting, Cara. Once you look behind the curtain, this is what happened to me. Look, I was never into all of this. I was, chugging along on a hamster wheel like so many other people for so many years. And I really can't pinpoint the exact moment in time when I decided that for whatever reason I was going to peek behind the curtain.
Right.
And the thing is, once you take a peek behind the curtain and you see the Great Oz, you never go back to the way you used to think.
Right.
Because once you become aware, all that cognitive dissonance and that apathy, denial, it goes away. All of a sudden you realize you have been duped and manipulated since the day you were born.
Right. Right. And then as Harold will say, you end up with a vast sort of collection of people who the next thing they say is, well, what am I supposed to do with this information?
Right. That's right.
Right. Fair enough. Yeah. So that's really something we have to start talking about, Mike. What now? Okay. All right. Well, let's talk about the sacred ancient lifestyles that maybe were ours until 100, 200 years. I mean, we can't talk about history. They make that up. We don't know. We don't know what's happened before. Anything that's happened outside the realm of what I'm looking at right now, they're manipulating. All right? So you cannot know that 100 years ago things were not utopian. You can't, because they might have been. They're just rewriting history.
It's all a lie.
Yeah, it's all a lie, and they're rewriting history to herd us into the little channels that they want us to be in. So let's assume, I am inclined to assume that there is a sacred human lifestyle that's well within our reach. And all we have to do is identify the addiction to their nonsense, how that manifests itself, and step away. We can put down the toys and step away. We can. And when you say to yourself, oh, I can't turn off my TV, guess what you're looking at? What are you looking at, Mike? You're looking at an addiction.
Exactly. That's right.
That's what you're looking at. So you have to understand that they've addicted to us to just anything that comes to us through those particular five senses. All right, let's just talk about the five senses, although there are many more than that, but they've narrowed in on those particular senses, and they've really, pinned things to us through those senses. One of the things we can talk about is food. All right, I mean, think about that. Think about the television. Think about music. Think about movies. I can't go to a movie anymore because all I see is the psyop in front of me.
Yeah,
now.
It's the predictive programming. It's all their symbolism. It's all of that mind control nonsense when you go to the movies.
So we have to figure out what is instead. What's instead, Mike? And I think we shouldn't be afraid of that, although I would assume there's going to be some fear surrounding that because we don't We don't remember. But if you're old like me,
And
you
me.
you can remember being 5 or 6, yeah, and
Yeah.
just being out on the street in front of your house, being a hooligan, and the world was your oyster, yeah. So try to think back. I mean, the younger folks are at a disadvantage here, which is what makes it so important that we stop it in its tracks right now, because they don't have a point of reference like we do. We remember other things, even though we've never really been out from under this whole thing. I do remember glorious running around on the pavement, when it was 100 degrees and my feet were burning, and you know, and my trike was really cool, and the sky was blue, and
That's right.
there were snapping turtles in the road, and those sort of halcyon days, if you will, are in our memories, and so we know that something else, quote unquote, something else, is easy.
Well,
Something is right there.
that's an excellent point, Cara, because if you go back 50 years, a half a century, I'm the same age as you, so I have the same memories. And somebody could say, well, the Matrix has always been in place. You're just having fond memories, whatever it may be. And my response to that is no, wrong. Yes, the Matrix was in place, but in the 50 years since the time when I was a kid to now, it has grown into a beast. It is a monster today. When I go back as a kid, I remember my father worked, only my father worked. He made
Right.
enough money so that we had our home. We lived up on Long Island. Mom was a homemaker, which later on was vilified as something that was subservient to being a human being, that being a homemaker was something that you shouldn't aspire to.
Right.
She was raising the family, and look, we were outside, we had fun, we had our friends. It was just, even in school, we were even taught more quote unquote real history, as real as it could possibly be in school in those days, than these kids are ever going to be taught today. So I just want to say that it's not just fond memories.
Right.
It was clearly a different time, and it has gotten exponentially worse over the last 4 to 5 decades.
Right. Once they realized that they could do, well, the television, you can blame the television for that
Right.
in a lot of ways. Television, radio, that kind of stuff.
Well,
Because
we had 3 networks back then, remember?
yeah. Once they had us on that frequency,
Yeah.
they realized that they could really dial us.
Right.
I mean, it's going to be harder to do things like step away from vaccinating the babies and things like that, because they're making it so that, taking your children away, social services will take your children away.
Making
this
it mandatory.
legitimate human trafficking that's actually going on.
Hmm.
This is the part of the scenario, the Matrix scenario, that worries me the most. It's really hard to hope for grandchildren right now, because I can't begin to think what that means to my children and what they would have to battle. Or, however, I'm not going to let that get to me, because we are always going to be more powerful than they are, and we can always say no. We can just stop it, and we can say no. And I don't know, if we just turned off our television sets and stopped going to movies, that might cut their legs out from under them enough that they lose most of their power, And remember the Matrix. The Matrix is also something that human beings create. Remember, this is one of my primary postulates, is that we are manifesting what's in the 3D ourselves via our imaginations as that bridge between 3D and the morphic field. Okay, so it's not that the Matrix is unnatural, if you want to call it that. It became the Matrix when they took it over and started trying to harvest. And this is what they're doing. They're harvesting human energy, right? Every football stadium is a energy collector, folks. You get all these people, hundreds of thousands of people together, and they're just harvesting energy.
With their halftime rituals.
Yeah. So, it became an evil Matrix when we let them use us as batteries, basically. I mean, the Matrix is not wrong. That was a spot-on movie to a certain extent. But that's only half the story. The other half of the story is that we're here as co-creators. We create the 3D world, all right? And Ike says it's a hologram, and he's right, okay? But so what? We're making it. We're making what we're supposed to be making. We are stardust makers. We are earth makers. We are Sophia helpers. I mean, we're here to be part of this beautiful expression I mean, we're living on a spirit. We're living on Sophia. Yeah, this is a cosmic spirit, a cosmic expression, and we are here to help manifest that expression. Now, I don't want to call that the Matrix. I don't know what to call it, because the Matrix is, the Matrix is the bad guys. The Matrix is artificial intelligence. We're not artificial.
We can have such a beautiful existence, Karen. I know you know this, and I'm preaching to the choir, but we have to create it because we created this. I mean, this matrix that we're in, this was created by us. We bought into the predator's game plan. We embraced it, we believe it, and therefore we then go off and implement it because our thoughts create our reality. So if you believe that, as your example before, Germans and the British, if the British believe the Germans are their enemy, or the Germans believe the British are their enemy, well, those thoughts create the reality. Guess what? Now you have an enemy.
That's right. That's how powerful we are.
Right.
Bear that in mind. That's how much power we have. Right. And they're just harnessing the power to their ends. Yeah, it doesn't have to be that way.
Because using that example, if the German people and the British, if they turned around and said, you know what, those are not my enemies, those are my brothers and sisters, there is going to be no hate, there's going to be no dislike, and we're not going to embrace that whole program that you want to impose upon us, there would be no war.
Right.
And that's what people have to understand, because a lot of times when you talk about if you want peace, make peace, they think you're a hippie. I've been called that. Oh, you're a hippie, No, I'm not a hippie. Okay, I'm a critical thinker that says if we don't follow their program and we don't ingest their mental food that they're giving us, that we will have a better planet and a better place in which to live.
Right. And here's a couple of things I want to talk about real quick, because it's why this is urgent. I mean, we do have all of the wonderful things that we're talking about, but it's still urgent that we get this taken care of. And one of the things that lets me know that is David Keith just made the cover of Newsweek magazine. Did he not?
Yeah.
Was it Newsweek? He just put out a book not too long ago that said that the solution to all our problems was to douse the atmosphere in sulfuric acid. The man is insane.
Yeah, he's a nut job. Yeah.
And he is absolutely one of the two people who is spearheading, being the public face of chemtrailing. All right. And the man has been out, there's video after video after video of him saying the most psychotic things when it comes to chemtrailing. And yet, he just made the cover of Newsweek magazine as what? What was he, the ecological hero of the century or something? I couldn't believe my eyes. So this tells me that now is the time. Now, when something like that can happen, we got to get our boots on the ground and get it straightened around. We got to get it straightened around right now. And the other thing is, our children face a dichotomy that is absolutely crazy. On the one hand, I'm convinced that the generation that is here to take care of this problem in ways that are very, very specific. That means they are under absolute physical attack by the other side. So they're suffering like crazy. And they don't have the reference point. So they could get lost in the illusion very, very easily, because they don't have the anchor that we have, which was remembering 50 years ago. Okay? We have to help them help us. And we have to do it now. Okay? The best thing that I can say is get this information that people are trying so desperately to give you. I don't care who you get it from. But there are people like myself and like Harold and like Mike and other people who are trying to put together cohesive, easy to understand, real pieces of information that will help you unplug from the viciousness of this matrix, yes, so that you can help yourself. And if you don't want to help yourself, because, people being what they are, help your children. Help your children, help my children, help everybody's child, because those children are under attack in ways that are, to call them satanic right now doesn't even come close. It doesn't even come close. I'm positive that in the United States, the information that children are being sold, killed, sexually assaulted by the hundreds of thousands, you're not getting that information in the States, I don't think. But it's all over the airwaves in Europe and in the United Kingdom. Okay?
Especially in the UK. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, our children are being tortured. Our children are being destroyed. They are being, one of the things that happens is, and Mike can explain this better than I can for sure, but we have the Kundalini, we have the chakras, we have a way in which we incarnate when we are born onto this plane. We come up through the lower chakras as babies, and then we incarnate into the higher, more spiritual chakras. And if you assault a child, I mean, somebody said this to me. I think it was actually something I heard via Miles Johnston's programs, which, by the way, he's going to have us out in August, Mike, just as an aside to lecture. But if you assault a young child, specifically a boy, before the age of 4, then that Kundalini unwinds itself and, for lack of a better way to describe it, like crashes through the skull in a way, spiritually, and it's fractured and is splintered into a million pieces, and then they really can get in there and do program you, yeah, and make you whatever they want to make you, yeah. And if they do that, it's exceedingly difficult to access your higher chakras, to rise. And even if they can't find our heart chakra, they can at least go after our children in that way and try to nail them down to the lower chakras. And that's what's going on. That is what's going on. Children are being stolen from their families for almost no reason by the tens of thousands, and they're being assaulted physically, sexually, emotionally, verbally. It's a concerted, exponentially growing issue, and it's under all kinds of discussion in Europe and the UK. And I'll bet you anything, I don't live in the States, but I'll bet you anything you're hearing almost nothing about it.
Well, we're talking about this embedded trauma. So when you have abuse, whether it be a boy or a little girl, it's exactly what it does. It embeds the trauma, and that becomes then a suppressed memory. And that suppressed memory, even though you are not consciously aware of it, it's driving the behavior of that person, not only as a child, but as they go into their adult life. And this is why a lot of people have no explanation as to why they have a life where they're just filled with fear, they're filled with worries, emotional duress, and so on. And it's because these traumas were embedded at a very, very early age. And a lot of folks don't understand this because they don't understand how the brain works, how the mind works. But you will carry that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Your whole life if, it's not addressed, or you don't go to get some kind of help to get it resolved, the conflict resolved.
Right. And the thing is, I want to mention, because this is actually part of the strategy of the Frankfurt School. The first reference I find to this was in Hungary in 1919. Georg, what was his last name? Kuvash, something like that. Anyway, if it comes to me, I will tell you. It's outlined in the book. But he tried to introduce sexualization of children in kindergartens in Hungary when, in 1919, when the Bolsheviks tried to move in there and continue their Marxist revolution there. And it was such a Catholic country there that they were actually run out of town on a rail, thank God. But every time the Frankfurt School gets to a certain point in their manifestation, they start trying to sexualize the children. And that's why, because if you capture these open books, these beautiful open books before the age of 7, then you have tools. I mean, Ignatius Loyola said it, give me a child before the age of 7, and I care not who has him after that, because I will make the man. And John Watson, the behaviorist from Johns Hopkins University at the beginning of the 20th century, said the same thing. It was the linchpin of his behaviorist studies, which I've also examined in great depth, because we've been I want to say victims, I guess that's the right word, of behaviorists from him all the way through B.F. Skinner, who decided that we didn't even have souls, and they've redefined us, Mike, to the point where we don't really even qualify as human.
Right.
So they can do anything they want to us. So anyway, so I guess my point really was, now's the time. Now's the time because of the children, all right? And if you don't want to save yourself, save the kids, save the children.
Well, Cara, talking about the children, you're talking about trying to bring the sexualization into the schools, and they're still trying that. But in the meantime, what they've done, and they've done it very successfully, is they do it in covert ways, which is through the TV shows that the kids are watching, through the dolls that they're playing with. If you take a look at some of the dolls, especially like some of the little girls are playing with, and take a look at how those dolls are dressed,
Right.
like little prostitutes,
Right,
you know,
exactly.
and and so that's their covert way of trying to sexualize the kids, especially the girls,
Mhm. Mhm.
right? Basically to demean who they are as a gender,
Right.
and that's going on today. So if there's anybody listening who thinks, well, they're not teaching sexualization in my school, I'm okay, you
Huh.
better take a look at what your kids are watching and what
Yep.
your kids are playing with, because if it's not in your schools, it's being done that way.
Yep. Pay attention. Start looking. Start researching.
Exactly, exactly.
Start researching because this is really coming on strong right now. It's kind of like their final card. When they get to this point, it's like an end game. They feel like maybe they've got us cornered enough that they can play this card and then they'll really have us.
Yeah.
Same thing happened in 1919. So, luckily we are a species that tends to love our children, and that tends to be where they get shut down. So that's one of the reasons I'm mentioning that in a big way right now. And it may seem like we've just talked about 10 disjointed subjects, but we haven't. It all goes together. It is full spectrum dominance. So turn off your television set. Start trying to stop going to movies until you understand what it is that you're looking at. I'm not saying that film as an art form is 100% bad. I'm saying that it is used against you all the time, okay? Start reading books again, please. All right, books, words on paper. Start talking to each other. Investigate things like what's really going on with that cell phone, what's really going on with the Wi-Fi, what's really going on with the EMAG that's around you all the time, all right? And resonating to the see if you can find a more natural frequency. It's really hard now because you're surrounded by Gwen towers, and that's blasting these abnormal frequencies at us all the time, making our DNA dance, making our cells dance. It sounds hopeless, but I'm going to say it to you again until the day I die. We are more powerful than that, individually and collectively. Mostly individually, you know it? This is why you want to get one person at a time.
Right.
Yeah? Because individually, you are more powerful than everything that's being blasted at you.
It is full spectrum dominance, and I think our discussion was what we were doing. It wasn't disjointed at all. I think it was bringing into the picture all of these different ways and these
Yeah.
different tactics that they use in order to get to us. Because look, one tactic is not going to work for everybody. It's not one size fits all.
Right.
So for those people who have decided that I'm not going to watch television and I'm going to tune it out, well, then they have to have a plan B, C, D, E, and F, all the way down to Z, to try to get to those people. And some of us, they're never going to get to, and they know that.
Right.
But their thinking is, if I can get to the preponderance of the population, then we can get things pushed across the goal line. So that's why it's very, very important that people wake up and use your brain, critically think, free think.
Right. Well, and also start entertaining some really kooky stuff because
Yeah.
it really helps. For example, here's I think really really good exercise to that just kind of jars you enough to really start helping you unplug and think. Just think, because history, because the information has been completely managed and manipulated and given to us, and we've been surrounded by this for so very long. Think about something like this. How do we know that anything that we actually put in our mouths, even if it's stuff that they say is good for us or organic or nutritious or any of that, yeah? How do we know that that is how we sustained ourselves prior to being indoctrinated by them?
Right.
How do we know that? We don't. We don't know what sustained a human being prior to this massive brainwashing that's been going on. It could be an organic potato, but maybe we don't know that. Do you see what I'm saying? These really weird, these really sort of altering thoughts that you can have is a meditative way of jarring yourself. Yeah?
Yeah.
Is food really how we use, is it? Huh. Well, that's what they're saying, but I don't believe anything they say. Do you know, And I think that's just an interesting thought pattern to have. It's really been occupying me lately. What is it that sustains us? If human beings are filters, and if we in fact can, and we can, by the way, transform energy, whether it's whatever you want to call it, chi or whatever, that's love, you could call it anything. If we can transform that energy, and we can, into internal energy, how do we know that's not the primary way that we sustained ourselves for millennia? We don't know.
Right, and that's a very good point you're on, because I have had the same type of thought processes where you listen to them say, you know what, as a civilization, we never had it so good. This is a great time, and the most advanced. And I think to myself, well, since they lie about everything, that's a lie.
That's a lie.
That's a lie.
Yeah, there are, and all of the, see, that's actually a pretty good place to start. Start looking at the fringe Egyptologists.
Exactly.
That's a great place to start.
The pyramids are not built by who they say they were built by. The Sphinx was not built by who they say it was built by.
Yeah. Michael, what's the guy who put out Magical Egypt? Do you know there's an 8-part series called Magical Egypt? That's a great place to start, because he puts out some pretty amazing and provable and rational postulates. And by the way, can I talk about the word rational? Because I really want to talk about how English is used against us. That wonderful, brilliant, beautiful, beloved, gorgeous facility that English has to express feeling and meaning and really hit us in the solar plexus and the heart and all of that is one of the ways that they get us. It's one of the reasons they want the whole world to speak English, because it's very manipulable, okay? Yeah. And there are people who've been looking at this. I recommend this as a course of study as well. Good morning, well, MOURNING is also, we had for the weekend, WEAKENED, right? There are all kinds of ways that we tell ourselves things that we don't realize that we're telling ourselves. Like, have a good weekend, or here, oh yay, it's the weekend. Good morning. I try not to say it anymore, although I don't know what to say instead. But the thing is, in other languages, they can't do this to us, because other languages are far more specific. One of the things I looked at when I was writing this latest piece with Harold was the idea of rational and irrational, okay? And that went back to Spinoza. And I will say that people who've interviewed me when I start talking about this tend to look at me like they're not quite sure anymore, but I'm going to say it anyway, okay? Spinoza talked about 95% of the population being irrational, and permanently, by the way, permanently irrational. And then there were 5%, which I guess by inference you could call them rational, yeah? But what does rational mean, Mike? It means to be cut into pieces, doesn't it? Rations, parts, fractions, does it not? All right, so look at it that way. Please, I beg you to look at it that way. I'm permanently irrational. Yay! I'm not going to be the mirror they throw on the ground that ends up in a billion pieces. That's rational. We're put into parts. Please stop thinking of rational as reasonable or logical or coherent. These are much better words than rational and irrational. God bless the 95% of us who are freaking irrational permanently, okay? But that's the 95% that they want to get out of the way. They want to park us someplace, yeah?
Yeah, rational in their way of presenting it is you conform.
Yes.
It's conforming. It's basically, it's a mechanical aspect of they want to fit you into a box. And so if you're rational, you will believe the following because we told you, our experts told you, that this is the way it is. And if you don't believe what we tell you or what our experts tell you, then you are an irrational person.
Yeah, don't buy that anymore.
Don't buy that anymore. You need to look past all of their lies, free think, critically think, and question everything. Question everything. Because we're not kidding. Cara and I are not kidding, because we've done a lot of research between the two of us. They lie about everything.
Every single solid thing. Everything.
Yeah.
And frankly, you know, that 95%, that's what the schools were built for. Schools were built to house that 95%, to be trained to do what the 5% wanted, to stay the hell out of their way, and to be beasts of burden for them. That's what a school is, my friend. It has nothing to do with education. You know, education is something that you get outside of schools. So bear that in mind as well. And I'm a teacher, okay? I want to tell you I'm a Waldorf teacher, which I highly recommend in terms of an educational paradigm that actually teaches children to think about things in context and keeps the right and left brain talking to each other. It was invented in that one of those massive years, 1919, okay, by Rudolf Steiner, who actually said, this is an antidote. I am bringing this as an antidote to what's going on in the educational system globally, because if we don't stop that, we're cooked. Okay, now maybe he at 1919 didn't use the word cooked. Okay, I'm using the word, but that's exactly what he said. If this doesn't stop, it'll be the end of us. Okay.
Well, the schools, we talk about the schools, and they're indoctrination and entrainment centers. That's what they are. And like you said, it's to take the 95% and make sure that they don't critically think.
Right.
Because if schools were really about education, they would teach you life skills. They would teach you about nutrition, how to grow food, how to build a home, how to work with electricity, and along with, math and stuff like that. But when you take a look at what they teach you, they don't teach you any of that stuff.
Nope.
None of that stuff.
Nope, and it's getting worse.
And that's to keep you reliant on the authority system that's in place for those types of things. So if you want nutrition, you rely on authority to tell you what it is to eat. You don't have to grow your own food. You know why? You can go to the store down the block and buy all your processed GMO garbage, and you can eat that. You don't need to know how to build a home or how to repair a home. You don't have to know anything about electricity or plumbing or any of that good stuff, because you know what? There's going to be somebody else that's going to be able to do that for you. Yeah, we want you just to be a cog in the wheel. We don't want you to be smart. We don't want you to think. Like George Carlin had said, we just want you smart enough to work the machines.
Yeah.
That's all. That's all we want.
Yeah, and people are afraid. They panic because they think if the children don't go to through university, they won't get a job. That's not true. That's absolutely not true. I was, in fact, okay, first of all, before I forget, I want to say that if you want to know more in-depth about what's up with American education, you need to read John Taylor Gatto. John Taylor Gatto, one of my all-time favorite talkers and discussers about the American education system. You can watch him. He's got lots of videos out on YouTube, and it is worth spending a week with him, especially if you've got children. But certainly if you've been through school and you want to know what's going on with the education system. He was one of my major research pivots for my work. So there's that, number one. And number two, can I just tell you, one of the things, because we're talking about education, and one of the things that they will try to sell you in the world today, particularly in the United States, is that if a child isn't plugged into a computer by the time it's 4 or so, then, employment in the future is absolutely out of the question, and they'll never catch up, and they'll never, compete, and blah, 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 blah. Remember that one?
Yep.
That's still going on. So I'm taking a bunch of prospective parents around the school that I teach, which I do periodically, and give lectures on each class grade level and what happens in each grade level. And it just occurred to me, and I was having this discussion with the parents, when was the last time you were in a job interview and someone asked you if you had now were you on the computer by the age of 4, Mike? Because we really couldn't possibly hire you if you weren't on the computer by the age of, it's all bullshit.
Yeah.
It's absolute crap. No one cares whether you were on a computer by the age of 4. They want you on the computer by the age of 4 because they can make you that much more passive. They can derail your neurology, the things that should be developing on a human level that allow your capacities to unfold.
Yeah, they pump their propaganda into you.
Well, there's that. Plus, it really boils down to neurology. They can short-circuit the neurology that's supposed to be unfolding by plugging you into something that does it for you.
Right.
Okay, and so you're really, and even such lovely organizations as the American Academy of Pediatrics, which would rather probably be boiled in oil and tarred and feathered than disagree with the powers that be, has said, look, that's bad for your kids. Don't do it. It's bad. All right. And I will tell you as well that there is a Waldorf school in Silicon Valley. Do you know about this particular school, Mike?
No, I don't.
Well, there is one in Silicon Valley, and you guys look this up online because they've put out a 15-minute video. They send these guys who work in Silicon Valley at these computer companies, they send their kids to Waldorf schools where they do not come into contact with computers until they're 14 or even older. because they know that that's going to short circuit their imaginative qualities. They know that they're going to get people who can think on both sides of their brain if they keep them away from that technology for as long as possible. And they admit it. It's out there. You can look it up online. The Waldorf School, Silicon Valley. You will see this beautiful, 12, 13, 14, 15-minute video that they put out. Those guys know better. They don't they don't do this to their children. They know they're harming their children.
Well, okay. Steve Jobs had come out, before he passed away, that he wouldn't let his kids play with computers.
Right, because it short circuits the neurology.
Right.
There's plenty of time, but plenty of time for any of that later. And I had a professor who used to tell me, look, computer's just a dull substitute, really, for capacities that human beings already have. We already have all of those capacities. It's just a substitute for those things. It's a tool. All right? But we are those and so much more. So, all you're doing is putting something in your life that's substituting for things that you can already do. Don't do that to your children. Let their capacities develop.
People will say to me sometimes, well, Mike, this is some heavy stuff, and I can't spend all my time worrying about this stuff or researching it or digging into it or diving into a rabbit hole. And I say to them, look, I don't do that either. You have to live your life too. You have to enjoy your life. You're here also to enjoy the interactions with your fellow human beings, with your family, your wife, your husband, your partner, your kids, and so on. So you have to do that stuff. So I just want to make it clear to the audience too, especially if they listen to me, that I'm not espousing that we walk around in a state of heightened alertness and paranoia 24/7. There is a balance between living your life, enjoying your life, but also being aware of the manipulative forces that are out there that are trying to steer your life down a path that is going to be detrimental to you, your family, and humanity.
Yeah. 3 years ago, when I started keeping company with the man that I eventually married here, he used to say things like, we would have these conversations because he was a little bit ahead of the game in terms of research because he lived in Europe and I lived in the United States. Okay, that was really the bottom line. But he would end conversations by saying things like, "Well, then you are a slave." Oh my God, I wanted to kill him because you don't say that. You don't say that to an American, right? Number one. Never say that. But
slave.
We are, but on how many levels is he right? Because you got to talk about common law. You talk about Santos Bonacci's work. You talk about Mark Passio's work with, just talking about natural law. When I really came to grip, and then there was the whole thing where we got married and we had to get permission from the state, and it was all this big discussion about how it was a business, and all of these things just tailor-made to make your wife and your girl real happy. But in the end, in the final analysis, he was absolutely right about this stuff. And these are the things that shake you up into starting to look into personal sovereignty and things like that. For me, initially, it was about saving my children. And it remains about saving my children. I don't give a shit what happens to me, really, except in terms of how it affects my children and what kind of a world I leave them. And can I make my children well again, because the environment has just beaten them to a pulp. Okay, all of these things, these are the things that matter to me. And in the end, on top of that, we also should be looking at issues of personal sovereignty. We should be looking at the fact that we are traded on the stock exchange like cattle from 1930. This is the 20th century, folks. This is that, you live in the best of all ages baloney that they feed us and how advanced we are. Really take a look at this. And then one of those things is going to make you angry enough to go into action, whether it's the idea that you're a slave, whether it's the idea that they're killing your children, okay? And then Mike's right, of course, there are a million things to enjoy, but there are a million things to enjoy because we're human beings and we make those things for ourselves. But honestly, I think it is absolutely of the utmost importance right now that we separate ourselves from their illusion. And that's going to take some work, okay? Doesn't mean you have to stop going to work. It doesn't mean you have to stop doing what it is that you do to survive in the treadmill that they've got you in right now. But part of you, the higher part of you, can work on this, can work hard on this and crunch this. And you can pull yourself, and when you pull yourself out of the plug, you're helping the rest of us pull ourselves out of the plug too. And like I've said to Mike, we're just looking for critical mass now. So I don't know how it's received in the United States, and it could be that people are just getting tired of me saying this, but America, you don't know what's going on. You don't have a clue. We are completely hornswoggled. We are completely, they have pulled the wool so far over your eyes. You know, please, I know who you are. Deep down, your cultural inheritance, your folk soul is absolutely going to have a rash to that kind of stuff. Americans come into that culture to be sovereign. That is the reason. That is our folk soul. That is what we're supposed to be exercising. It's in our bones. We barely have to try to do it because we come in with that in our bones, which is why they need to subdue the Americans before they subdue anybody else. Because if they don't get us, they haven't got a chance of getting the rest of the world. Which is why we are under such electromagnetic lockdown. So America, I'm telling you, you don't know what's going on. You've got to wake up, okay?
Yeah, and just because, you can get in your car and you can drive to Walmart and, buy some stuff and drive back, you're not free. I have a family member, and he shall remain nameless. He just does not understand. He does not understand that he is under an umbrella, an authority umbrella, that everything that he thinks that he's free to do, he's not really free to do. And then when he starts to maybe have a little inkling that perhaps, Mike's got a point with regard to the authority that's all around us, he resorts to the defense that, well, without the authority, society wouldn't function. That it would be disorganized, it would be in disarray, it would be chaotic. So you need authority in order to keep order. And so what that really means is that I'm too lazy to take responsibility for my life and be accountable and, to run my life and make sure that, as Max Egan says, do no harm. So I am either incapable of myself of doing that, or other people would be incapable of it. And don't get me wrong, what I tell folks, Cara, is that this is not some kind of change that's going to happen tomorrow, because it's going to take many, many years. In my view, it's going to take probably a lifetime of constant reorientation toward who we really are and what we really are in order for us to reach a point where we have a society where we actually are sovereign and we live as sovereign citizens, where we are self-regulating, we are self-governing, and we are good to each other, But it's just amazing to me. I had this conversation, and I'll tell you, I have to bite my lip, and it takes everything within me not to reach over the table and strangle him to death. But I don't have to worry about saying this because he won't listen to my shows.
He's never going to hear this anyway. Okay, well, yeah, but you're right. But you know what? Why not, Mike? Because you know why people have midlife crises?
Yeah.
They get to be 40, 50 years old and they think, what is this? This sucks. Like, this is it? This is it? That's why. So why not? Why not put your shoulder to this other wheel and find out who you really are? Get down to, the sacred human being that you really are. And that just means identifying every freaking illusion and trying really, really hard to step back from it. Why not? Because what is your alternative? Your alternative is this mindless, boring, oh my God, is this all it is? There is to life. March toward, death, toward the crossing from this plane to the next. How boring is that? And, Joseph Campbell, another one of my heroes, so there's really nothing more boring or sick-making than the hero refusing the journey. Well, heroic journeys are not easy, and we're all heroes. We're all here to blaze our own path. I mean, really, we all have our own machete that we're chopping our way through the jungle with. Okay, and it's not picking up that machete and going forward that causes us to be sick, that causes us to be bored, that causes us to waste our lives. Okay, so there's nothing as boring as hero's refusal to take up his sword and go forward. And that's all of us. Your option is midlife crisis, and who needs it?
Well, Cara, we're pushing up against the 2-hour mark as usual because
We always do.
We always do. It's such a great conversation. It's so relaxed, and we get a lot to talk about.
Was there anything that we wanted to hit from Harold's conversation specifically?
Not really. It was a lot to consume. I mean, basically, my takeaway from part one of this, for the audience that will be listening to this, part one we spoke mostly with Harold and Kautzvella, and he spoke about really new technology that is essentially changing your DNA and your RNA, and it's mind-boggling stuff. And what's really interesting to me is that the level of technology that they have is really beyond comprehension. I mean, just when you think you've read a lot, and you think you understand, kind of where they're at with this stuff, then Harold comes on and talks about what he knows, and you realize that it's way beyond that.
Right.
Way beyond that.
And let me tell you something else. Step up, America, because Harold speaks just about every day in Germany because people are ravenous for this information. They want to know what's going on, okay? And he's constantly speaking at conferences or being called for interviews. Okay, this is the stuff that we need to be ravenous for, too. This is the real stuff. This is the information, okay? And as Harold calls it, I think we talked about this last time. He called this the inform, to inform. Well, they're doing it in their own way 100% of the time. So start paying attention to the rest of us who are out there trying to inform you with reality, with real stuff. Okay?
Right. That's right. Well, anyway, Cara, so an absolute pleasure.
All right. Well, let me know. Let me know what's up. Who else do you have this week? Yeah, Mike, thank you.
Actually, Max Bliss is coming back on the show. I spoke to Max Egan last night. Max and I had a very good conversation. It's going to be a bit hard-hitting. We talk about Zionism, and that's always, to some people, not for me or Max, a touchy subject, because of the programming. Who else do we have here? Believe it or not, I'm going to be speaking to a guy tomorrow that has gotten into the flat Earth theory.
Yeah,
so
I saw something about that.
It's interesting to me. So I'm not bought into it or out of it. I just want to talk to him to get some information, because that's what the show is about, is just to kind of get some information, get the critical thinking juices going, and so on. And who else is going to be coming on? Oh, Deanna Spingola is going to come back on. She is fabulous, a fabulous researcher and an author, and we're going to talk about the Holocaust, and we're going to talk about the alternative, version of what the Holocaust was and was not. That's going to be a very, very hard-hitting show, and it's going to make a lot of people probably very uncomfortable, because it's going to cut across the grain of what people have been told and taught and trained to believe what the Holocaust is.
Yeah, you better do it now, though, because it's illegal to talk about it in Germany. It's now illegal to talk about it in Canada.
Well, in many European countries, you can't talk about it. You will. There are laws against talking about it. Which, by the way, if there's a law telling you can't talk about something, you should stop and think to yourself, that doesn't quite seem right. Why is that? So you should question that immediately. So we're going to get that show out, and that's going to be. I am very much looking forward to that show, because I think we need to have a very rational, logical discourse on that topic. And I plan on having that with Deanna.
Yeah, good. You know who else you should try to get a hold of is this woman called Mel V. Have you heard of her?
No, I have not.
Well, first name is Mel, M-E-L, and her last name she actually spells V-E.
Okay.
Type in Mel V and Hampstead Heath, and she will talk forever about what's going on in the UK right now, especially about this Hampstead Heath thing.
Yeah.
Which was the Christ Church school and those 2 children who came forward and all of that. She's really doing a lot of interviews right now about that. She is a talk show host anyway. She used to live in London. I think she's South African, but she lives in Holland now. Anyway, you should try to get a hold of her, because America also needs to be slapped around on that one. They need to know what's going on, because it's going on in the States too.
It's going on all over the place.
All over the place. So, all right, my friend. See you later, yeah?
All right, Cara. Bye-bye.
Bye.
And that concludes part 2 of my interview with Cara St. Louis and Harold Kautzvella, and I hope you enjoyed the discussion as much as I did. Cara and Harold's book, Dangerous Imagination, Silent Assimilation, can be purchased at Amazon.com in both paperback and Kindle. And for geographies where the hard copy version of the book is not available, you can purchase the book by heading over to Indie Kitchen. The link is in the show notes below. Cara's website is Vortex Conscious and Courageous and can be reached by going to vortexcourage.me, where you can find many fine articles, including material by Harold. And as always, I'd like to thank everyone for listening and visiting the blog, Sage of Quay Radio, which can be found by heading over to sageofquayradio.blogspot.com or by visiting our hub website at www.sageofquay.com. Also, if you get a moment, please take a listen to my album, Leaving Dystopia, by heading over to laboroflovemusic.com. And remember, live in truth and always serve creation. It's really that simple. See everyone next week. Be safe, enjoy, and God bless.